White society has effectively abused the word woke to death, like the word intersectionality. Before that, bae. Before that, swag. Before that, and bling before that. Whiteness is a non-stop cycle of leeching of black people to every extent possible while lacking self-awareness. Tweeted by Bree Newsom. Hey, welcome to Tuesday's episode of the Toy Talks podcast. Please, Toy Talks podcast listeners, my enemies are after me. Please send prayer. Please send prayer. How many times have I said it? My Toya Talks podcast listeners, please, my enemies are after me. Please send prayer. If you want to also add fasting as well, we can accept that. Listen, those of you who have watched Tinder Swindler on Netflix, you know why I've said that. And honestly, all over the media, it's been Tinder Swindler, all over social media. And in this week's episode, I wanted to give my view about it, but also I want to talk about swindling, not just in a romantic sense, but also in a work-related sense as well. How sometimes we are swindled into the fantasy of an organisation, especially when you go for an interview, and it's this plush reception area, people are wearing suit and tie, or the way they'll make their website lavish, and you're swindled into a false sense of security. Before that, you are thinking of all the things that you could achieve in this organization, and then you're swindled out of not negotiating your salary, or swindled out of not necessarily coming to the table with what you believe that you deserve. But also, we need to address swindling from the romantic sense, obviously in light of the Tinder Swindler on Netflix. And also as well, I do have a couple of dilemmas. One of them actually came from TikTok. It's my first TikTok related dilemma, and I really want to talk to you about that as well, because when it came through, it was quite an interesting one, and it's a topic that I haven't necessarily touched on. It relates to resignations, and hopefully we'll be able to deep dive into that. So let's start off. I am calling this episode Dying on the Hill of Lifestyle. Oh my God, we're coming in strong. Listen. So the Tinder Swindler, I don't need to get into the dynamics of what it was about. We all know. Now, I did see a lot of opinions on social media about, these women deserved it, this, that, and the third. But before we even get into that, why is it that white people who do this type of thing is called swindling? They're swindlers. They have a romanticized word to describe what they're doing when it's basic fraud. But if it's a black man doing this, he's called a scammer. And the word scammer, you know it's fraud, you understand? But swindling, it's almost like a Robin Hood type of romanticized element of fraud. And I did feel as though, when I watched it, I thought this is how society, especially when it comes to things like fraud, depicts fraud in a damsel in distress. These three women, like the first woman Cecilia, oh my God, all she wanted was love. Whenever she thought about love, she thought about Walt Disney and Beauty and the Beast and all these things. But then you get to a point where you have to take that away, like you have to remove that, and it comes from this whole, this white women and their tears and the whole white fragility depiction. To be honest with you, I didn't feel sorry for them. The only person that I had respect for at the end was Cecilia, who was the third lady, that when she took all the clothes that she knew that he loved, and she made him believe that she was going to sell these clothes and give him the money, and homegirl was, listen, the way she washed them clothes, the way she ironed them clothes and sold them on eBay to get her money back, like for me, she was hustling a hustler, and I respected it because she realised quite early on that she was being swindled. But rather than kind of find reason, she thought, how do I make my money back? How do I get some type of justice? Because I think deep down inside she knew that she wasn't going to get justice if she went through like the legal route, especially because she realised that there was other women who were scammed by this guy. Cecilia troubled me a little bit because I couldn't feel sorry for her, because number one, she returned back to Netflix after all said and done. So she wasn't scarred enough to think, right, she needs to take some time out and do some soul searching and see where she could learn from the situation. She willfully deceived Amex into giving her more money, lifting the threshold of money that she was allowed to take. She willfully knew that she was not an employee of this guy, yet she allowed him, and I say allowed because she basically said he could do it, make it seem like she was on his payroll, earning, I think it was like 94k a year or something, and they upped her credit limit. So for me, that was a willful attempt to also defraud. So I can't feel sorry for you, because at any one time where you could have been seen as kind of being duped or manipulated, you became the manipulator when you manipulated Amex. Now, the other lady was quote unquote his friend, and I don't understand what type of friendship like that was, where she felt like she could give him her life savings that she was saving for her house. I didn't really understand that. At least with Cecilia, she was a hopeless romantic. I think there was an element of, you know, she fell in love with the lifestyle he presented because she was gullible enough to want it so bad. When she was going around looking at all these houses, 500,000, how many thousands, she knew she couldn't afford it. She was relying on him to pay for it. So to an extent, you have to think to yourself, how easy was it for her to be blindsided by lifestyle and want to romanticize this clearly, you know, flawed romance? And some people say, well, it's easy for you to say when you're on the outside, but when a man is telling you that his father's on the Forbes list, he's one of the richest men, at no time did any of these women say, can't you go to your family and get this money? Can't you speak to your dad? It's almost like, especially the first lady, Cecilia, it's almost like this savior complex. If I save him, he's going to love me more. You know, that's kind of like what I got from that. I definitely think that, you see some of these women, yeah, I have to be honest, it can't be a Niger boob. No, we have to taste your money finish before you can even try to swindle. We have to taste your money. So it took what? One private jet, a couple of expensive trips to a restaurant, a couple of fancy, what do you call this one? Prawns and what's that? Mussels. And already your knickers are ready to cash in anything, cash out. Like, what are we really saying here? Are we as a society accepting that when it comes to dating, that there are some women that are so in love with the idea of being in love that they're willing to compromise themselves and rationale to be able to achieve it? My thing is this: I think anyone can be swindled, right? And there are different degrees of swindling. This is hundreds of thousands of thousands of thousands of pounds. But even from a dating perspective, we've all been swindled. Me too, I've been swindled. I think I told you guys about the guy. Did I not tell you guys about the guy? So I met my husband on Tinder. And when I say husband, don't think I've been married for years. Like, we got married last year, July. So we're a relatively new married couple, right? We were together for 4 years by the time we got married. And we met off Tinder. But even before I get into all of that, because I have spoken about that before, but I went on dates with a few people from Tinder. There was this one guy, well, there's two, but there's one in particular that I remember, yeah. And he swindled me out of a Nando's. And he had the cheek to order lemon and lime as well. So that one was like pure slap in the face, like. But the way he made himself out, like he's he's like looking to kind of date somebody seriously and da. And he created this whole image of, and now I realize it's how he wanted to see himself, not necessarily how he was. But the alarm bell started ringing when he basically said that he had an appointment to have a scan on him because he has high blood pressure and there was no one to go with him. So for me, I don't know what was going on in my mind. I offered to go with him. I know, I don't understand. And I remember the hospital was in Croydon, because I remember, was it Croydon? Or West Croydon, East Croydon, one of them ones. I just remember, like, I'm not from these ends. And when I met up with him, I was expecting him. I'm not going to lie to you. I never dated guys that don't drive. I'm sorry. I'm really, really sorry, yeah? I've suffered in this winter. I've suffered at these bus stops. And I have suffered at the train station. I will not date a guy that does not drive. Sorry, that's my thing. Listen, everyone has their non-negotiables. That's one of mine. So me, I got off at the station and I'm expecting to see a car pull up. So I'm calling to find out where he is. And I'm talking about, he's like 6'6", 6'7". He's a tall guy. And he was like, oh, you know, nice to meet you, hugged, you know. So I'm thinking we're walking towards the car. Nah, we went to a bus stop. And obviously I'm not from these ends, so I don't know these numbers of buses. I don't know where we're going. I just know that this man's trying to get on a bus. And in my head I was thinking, you know, you get to a certain height and you shouldn't be getting on the bus anymore. I'm sorry, I said it. If you are over 6'5", what are you doing on that bus? Because you're bending to get in it. And when you're going upstairs, you're bending. You're bending. That bending is bend into a car, stop bending into a bus. That's just what the Lord is saying to you. So I'm sitting there thinking, okay, because the way he held himself out, like, you know, anyway, as we're sitting on the bus, he's trying to tell me that he doesn't drive because of the environment or whatever he said. But I remember on Tinder, he said to me his car was getting fixed or whatever, but it should be ready by the time he meets up with me. So obviously 2 and 2 equaling 10. Anyway, whatever. So then we get to the hospital now. He has his appointment. Everything is fine or whatever. And I'm starting to think, is this a ploy for me to lower my defenses now because you've come for high blood pressure? What's all this? And I'm realizing the reason he had high blood pressure is because he's full of bullshit. So he's getting called out on his bullshit and he's causing his high blood pressure. Because what happened next just blew my mind. So he asked me if, like, we wanted to go and eat or something, and I was like, yeah. So we went to Nando's, and Nando's is like happy medium. It was like an afternoon. It wasn't like a big deal. And I'm still talking to this guy. I'm getting to know him, and I'm just thinking to myself, this I don't understand. I'm thinking we are now going to get on the same bus back to Nando's. It was embarrassing, and he was so like built like a, you know, like these American football players. Like he had no business being on the bus. I was so squashed near the window, yeah. You know them ones where you're so squashed near the window and you're breathing, and it's hot air that you're breathing onto the bus window because I'm squashed there. Anyway, we get off the bus, we go into Nando's. And everybody, we know what Nando's is. You go line up, they'll give you your number for the table, but you line up, you order your food, then you sit down. I want you to explain to me why this guy sat down. He went to go sit down. I was so hungry, and I don't catch shame easily. I say don't catch shame easily. I don't like to catch shame at all. So I asked him what he wanted, and he gave me a list of what he wanted, and he told me that, you know, when it comes to like the heat and everything of what you want, he said lemon and lime. I said, yes, I am the lemon and lime. I am the foolish person. I'm the one that got on that bus today. I'm the one that crouched down to squash myself on the side of that bus. I am now the one that has been swindled indeed. I've been scammed. Yeah, because you've managed to get me to a point now whereby we've gone to the hospital because high blood pressure. But rather than me ask you the reasons why you have this high blood pressure at your young age, I'm doing sympathizer, no problem. Then I go and order the food like a fool. When I look back, I think to myself, Tui, what's wrong with you? But I think maybe in my mind, I must have been that hungry, because normally I would just walk out the door. But maybe also as well, I couldn't believe what was happening. So you know that when you're stuck in a trance, I was transcending into the lemon and lime. Anyway, so the food comes now and he's there eating. The way he's eating this food, I want you to explain why this man puts his fork into my plate. Wow. I was scammed. He scammed my time. He scammed me for a lunch. He scammed me by deceiving me. That was the last time he saw me. The way I blocked his number. When I get home, you're messaging me, can't wait to catch up. Of course you can't wait to catch up, because it was free. You paid minimal amount to get on a bus. You didn't pay for your own lunch. Somebody accompanied you. Me, I was a chaperone. I was a chaperone for the day. Abi, chaperone. Just call me Auntie Chapeau. Yeah, I was a chaperone. Bullshit. And the reason I use that as an example is there's different degrees of scamming, right? But let us not pretend like we haven't all been in a situation where we've been deceived. Now, when it comes to money, I genuinely think that those women didn't have respect for money. Because I feel like if you have respect for money, if you have come from nothing, you would police that money. So for me personally, if any one of my friends coming to me asking me for money, before I give or even consider giving, I'm first of all looking at their relationship with money. because for you to ask me for money, we must be close enough for you to feel vulnerable enough to ask me. So I already know what your relationship is with money. I don't give you to keep. You have to give me that money back. And even if it takes you 6 months, I have to trust that money is going to come back. Do you understand? And I know my friends know, like, no matter what happens, I'm always going to be there for them. But I have to also police my money too, because I've come from nothing. So for me to just give up money like that and say, okay, you want 20 grand. Okay, here's 20 grand. Like, who does that? Like, especially for me, I feel like when you've come from nothing, and maybe you have a very difficult relationship for money, or maybe you're developing a better relationship with money, then how you use money or how you spend money or how money departs from you is policed. These women were just too free to just give the money. And it has to be that they really did have a superhero complex where they felt they were saving him. So in doing that, he's going to love them more. And every time he's putting pressure, he says, I love you, I so love you, I love you so much, what will I do without you? And they're flexing shoulders until they realize that all the money he's pretending to send back isn't landing in their account. And you get to a certain point where you do have to think to yourself, like, especially like the first woman, why does she feel so secure? Was she that cheap enough that all she had to do is go in a couple of private jets and eat a couple of squid and lobster to feel as though, you know, he really did create, he must have really created a distraction in deceiving them into really believing that he is from money. Because I tell you something, my mum always says this to me, and I grew up with this notion. She used to say to me, people with money don't scream from the rooftops that they have money. Anyone that is doing flashy, Pastor Toby, flashy, they don't have money, you know. Because people that really have money, yeah, are too busy spending it, investing it, or making more of it to be standing at the rooftop screaming about money. Anybody that will be drippy, and they'll be screaming money, and they'll be flashing money, spelling things on the floor with their money. They don't have money. Because people that really respect money, people who really have that generational wealth type of money, they don't act like that. You've got people like Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs wore that black turtleneck from the beginning of time. That man was a multi-millionaire. You will not know it. You have Jeff Bezos. When you look at Jeff Bezos, I'm sorry, humbler. That man is he's a billionaire, innit? He's a billionaire even. Before billionaire. Bill Gates, well, we already know him. So, for me, I definitely, and maybe it's the Niger in me, because Nigerians were naturally very, like, flashy, like, you know, like, flashy generally anyway, like, see me, you know, that type of thing. So, we are very aware, like, there's a heightened sense of awareness when somebody is too flashy like that. You know, I knew somebody who would go to the club, yeah. We would go to club, group of us would go to club. He will buy drinks, eh? At one stage, there were so many drinks, there wasn't even space to put it again. We had to put it on the floor. You know them one? But then, on a Monday, he's looking for money for petrol to put in his car. Context. Like, I definitely feel like, especially Cecilia, but these women did not do their due diligence. They didn't spend enough time watching him, making sure that what he says correlates to his actions actions correlate to what he says. I think they were just so in I've met him off Tinder and this is how it's supposed to go. And I think there's a lot of people that romanticize romance, and this is why I hate rom-coms. They don't show you all the bits in between. They will show you one sad story and then how love conquers all. But I'm going to sit here and tell you straight, like, it's not all just about love, you know. It's not all just about love. Like, there are so many women that I know that are great women and are doing amazing things and are building themselves so that when they meet somebody, that person will then compliment them. But there's equally a lot of women that are wanting to get married so bad. Like, I know there's this one person I know or knew, and all she wants is just to get married. All she wants is to get married. And I'm not going to sit here and lie to you. In the terms of Nigeria girl, Igbo woman, I got married quite late, yeah? and even some of my relatives back home were asking questions. And I will put my hands up and say that for me, marriage is a really big deal. So I wasn't going to marry the first person that asked me, and I have been asked twice before, and both of them didn't even present a ring. They were just using their mouth to come and ask me if I'll marry them. So already I knew that wasn't serious. But at the same time, I definitely feel as though when you think of what marriage is, it's such a serious institution. It's a business arrangement as well. People are not understanding. You're bringing two cultures, or maybe the same culture, upbringing, finances together. There's a level of financial nakedness and trust to be able to get in a position where you're going to marry this person. This is someone who you are intending to spend the rest of your life with. Like, marriage is a big deal. And I feel as though when they romanticize what romance is, they don't think about the other things that are integral to relationships, like communication. Like when you talk about what the future looks like, and maybe if you want kids, how you're going to raise them, or maybe you don't want kids. Maybe have you had that conversation? Like, what does a healthy relationship look like? Has that person ever experienced a healthy relationship? Is that person emotionally healthy in themselves to be in a relationship? People don't want to talk about that. They want to talk about, okay, we're going to Tinder now. Listen, I've said to everybody that I know who is single, I really enjoyed the dating stage. I dated many, several, and I dated frequent, okay? And I did non-sexual dating. And maybe people could see me as a swindler as well, because I had a guy for Monday to Friday eating. I had a guy for taking me to the cinema. He'll take me to the best cinema ever. Cinema B, Food B, Weekend Food B. Yes, I did. And that's how I wanted to date, because I think before I focused my mind on what I wanted, I knew that I just wanted to date. And then I started building a picture of who I wanted to be with and what qualities I would want. And then I became intentional about dating. But before you become intentional, there is an element of just dating to date. And I feel like in order for you to really be able to identify the type of man you want to be with, or who that person is, you need to go through the pains of dating waste men. I'm sorry, because there's different degrees of waste. This one that was doing bend back on the bus bay, that one tells me that maybe he doesn't want to drive for whatever reason, but equally he's not happy in himself, because that's not the picture you were painting to me. Yeah, when you were trying to get me to come with you to this hospital appointment, this is your idea of a date, and me being a fool, I went. But was I foolish? No, because until I went with him, I wasn't able to discount him. And equally as well, there was one quality about him that I liked, and it was the fact that he liked to talk. And I like to talk too. I like somebody who's able to hold a conversation. And maybe that was the only lesson that I was to learn from that one. It wasn't even a date. I would just call it just an outing. You understand? So when we talk about scamming and swindling, we've all been in that situation. And it's about degree, right? And I genuinely think as well that at some stage you have also been a swindler. Yeah, because listen, both people are putting their best foot forward. You're coming with the best version of yourself. That's not actually who you are. So you two are doing some type of manipulating, swindling too, because you want to hold yourself out to be the best. And that is what that person's doing. The fact is, dating, if done properly, is an opportunity to break some of that down. It's also an opportunity to get to know what you like, or if you like anything about this guy or girl or whoever. And it's also important as well, I feel like, through the process of dating, that you're doing your due diligence on yourself. Am I taking everything this person is saying at face value? Have I asked enough questions about this person? How far into this dating am I going to get to a point where I can focus on one person? And these are the questions you need to be asking yourself, because I'm telling you right now, and I've said it to Kay, I enjoyed my dating period until I got sick of it. So I had dated until I was tired, and then I knew, okay, I want to be a bit more intentional now. And therefore the questions that I would then ask certain people on Tinder was a bit more pointed, a bit more directional. Now I say, and I talk about Tinder, and I know that Tinder has changed. Like, that was like almost 5 years ago when I was on Tinder. So I know it's changed, and I've been told it's a bit more of a hookup site. But equally, I know there's other dating sites that are popping up that are a bit more serious. And I just feel like it's important that we do watch programs like this, because it raises awareness that there are people out there who are professional scammers, professional swindlers. And they don't come out there and, you know, say, oh, I'm a scammer. It's what they're trying to sell you. If someone's trying to sell you a lifestyle too much, it's usually that they're not living that lifestyle. There was a guy that I dated off Tinder, and I told you guys about him before, where I didn't know that he married somebody for papers, and then the woman found out he married for papers. So then obviously they separated. Fine, fair enough, people marry for papers all the time. But it's the fact that he didn't tell me that he was married and separated. So something just wasn't adding up about this guy. And in terms of how far I was into my dating process, I had dated quite a few guys. So there was like signs. For example, he had short man syndrome anyway. So why he was driving this magnificent car didn't make sense. But he kept telling me how much he earns, like he was a contractor. All he would talk about is money. And he was a Nigerian guy. So already I'm just thinking, what is this? And he would say to me, I'm sure soon I will be the one paying for your wigs. They look very expensive. And I'm like, who asked you to pay for my wigs? You know, little things. And he was just very materialistic. So he'll post pictures on Instagram. He'll be on a yacht somewhere in Nigeria. He'll be here. He'll be over there. And I thought to myself, this is not making sense, because you're telling me that you make all this money. But when I came over to your house, you was in a house share. It was a flat share. So if you're that rich, how can you be sharing with four people in flipping, what do you call it, Canning Town? It doesn't make sense. But your car, now you're telling me, you need to change your car. So we go to the dealership, and the dealership is in central London somewhere. So I'm thinking that, because he's made out like he bought his car cash and everything, then the man is telling him how much finance he's got on the car left. I was like, excuse me, I'm a bit confused here. Then as I began my due diligence and the story was unraveling, I was really paying attention. Then he starts talking about, then he feels like he has to do this grandiose confession about being married and separated. And I was in a state of shock, because I knew something wasn't right. And it was preventing me from connecting with him. So I wasn't cutting guys off. I was still dating other guys. But he was, telling me that I should focus on him. That type of thing. And something just wasn't right. Then I realized that what this guy was trying to do, he was trying to scam me. He was trying to be a swindler. He knew I lived on my own and everything. Obviously, he's separated from this woman. She's probably not going to now. She's probably going to tell the Home Office they're not together anymore. So he's looking for his next opportunity. He's looking for his next come up. He even asked me, and I'll never forget, when we second date, he asked me if I was born here or born in Nigeria. Do I have a British passport? He goes, are you British, or do you have a British passport? You're doing them jokes there. And I'm just thinking, why are you so focused on my British passport? Obviously, because he was lining me up. And I'm thinking that if I was like Cecilia or any of these women from Tinder Swindler, I'm telling you now, this man would have married me for papers, collected everything, divorced me, and left me in the gutter. He would have done that. And you know what the funny thing is? A few years ago, I was on Snapchat, and there was a particular, social media, YouTuber. And he was on her stories. And I thought to myself, he's still doing that lifestyle. If you see this man in a suit, I swear to God, if you see this man and he walks past, you might get cut, because he was so sharp in this suit. And he's doing lifestyle. Whereas I now know his story, right? I've asked the question, I've done my due diligence, he's done all this confession. He really thought he had manipulated me. I really think that he thought that he could emotionally manipulate me into feeling like I had to be Cecilia, the superhero. Oh, I'll help you find a lawyer. I think he kept telling me that he's falling in love with me. In my head, I'm thinking, how can you fall in love with me? You don't even know me. You don't know my favourite colour. You don't know any of these things. And if I really take a step back and look back, I really thank God for just being a Niger babe that really is on point and on the level, because I know that it doesn't take a lot for some women to fall for this. And I really genuinely feel like if I was very much warped into really believing everything he said, I would have been that woman that would have married him, or would have paid for a lawyer because I'm trying to be a superhero. then married him so he could get his papers, and he would have stripped me naked of everything I've worked hard for. He would have, because that's the type of character he is. So when I saw him on this YouTuber's Snapchat stories, part of me wanted to like reach out to her and say to her, listen, this guy I dated, I got rid of him because of XYZ, be careful. But the way her attitude is set up, I knew that if I had, she would see me as the problem. And you know what the funny thing is? When I went onto her Instagram, she blocked me. She doesn't know me from nowhere. I've never met her. I've never spoken to her. Why are you blocking me? And I genuinely think it's to do with this guy. Because obviously he knew as well that I was on social media, but I don't think he necessarily knew the extent. And I say that, but I caveat that by saying, thinking back, he must have Googled me, because by then I'd already done Big Brother and stuff. And I think that he earmarked me to swindle. I genuinely believe it. But for this woman to block me on Instagram, she's never spoken to me before, she doesn't know who I am. Well, I think she doesn't. And there was no reason why she would, do you understand? And I believe at one stage I was even following her. And it was around the time, obviously, I saw him on her Snapchat that she blocked me, and I thought, it's because of him. And she gives me that aura, like she's not a girl's girl. She's one of those ones that she gives me that feel, like certain things I've observed about her, I can see that she's easily distracted by material things. So it wouldn't be a surprise that he basically would have influenced her or told her or whatever. There's no reason why you're blocking me. You don't know me from nowhere. Do you understand? We've never had an argument. We've never had a discussion. We've never exchanged words. In fact, you've never seen me in person. So it must be because of that guy. But this is what certain guys do, right? They'll manipulate you into believing in a false narrative, lull you into a false sense of security, make you feel that you're their lifeline, and before you know it, you're handing over your emotions, and with that comes a whole load of other expenses. So yeah, I wanted to share that and kind of give my view about the Tinder swindler. I think it makes for good viewing, and I think especially if you are dating on social media, I think it's important to kind of watch these things so that you have a heightened state of awareness about how people manipulate and how people use social media, and the fact that, you know, there is still this thing about dating someone from a dating site. You know, there's still this, I feel like, not I wouldn't say that it's a taboo per se, but there is still this whole, oh, you've met somebody off Tinder. Because even when I tell people I met Kay off Tinder, there is this step back they take, but that's how people date. You know, we've been in a lockdown for a whole 2 years. How are people meeting? Do you understand? How people are talking? It's through like dating sites, and it's through, you know, Tinder, and it's Bumble and all these things. And I feel like, irrespective of whether you're a man or a woman, the reality is, if somebody wants to manipulate you, they will try. And your job is to really take the time to get to know someone. Don't be so free about, number one, wanting to save somebody, but using money to do it. Like, we've all been in situations where we have given money to an extent, or you've paid for something that you shouldn't have. But it's about degree. And I think with these women, it just went too far. Like the other woman that said she was his friend, there was something that wasn't right, because this person you haven't even known a year, and he's come to you with all this and telling you you're his only hope. And again, you're doing Superwoman to go and save him. It just doesn't make sense. But yeah, you know, it happens from a romantic sense, but it also happens from a job perspective as well. How many of us have been sold something at interview stage, and you go there and there's a whole pile of shit and a heap of hell? There was this one organisation I was working for, and I'll never forget it, because I always wanted to work there. And when I applied directly, they never responded to my email or my job application. And then an agency had reached out to me, and they were like the sole recruiter for this particular organisation. So anyway, they submitted my CV. They wanted to interview me. I was so excited, yeah, because number one, I wanted to work with them, but number two, like, I'd applied and didn't get no response. So I remember getting to my interview early and going into the Starbucks, and I could see this tall building from Starbucks, and I thought, I want to work there. You know, they have this prestigious building there, and you know that type of glass where you can see in there, but people can't see out, or they see out and you can't see in. You know, it was just doing bits. And you know, there's like a prestige of certain places. Like, for me, it was the designer of workplaces. When you say the name, people know in that industry, like that's the place to work. So I must have gone there for my interview. If you see the reception area, the reception area was so nice. It was like glass. You had the turnstiles, the sofas. When you sit in the sofa, it sinks your bum into the sofa. You know, massaging your bum, your back is feeling. You know, it gave luxury. luxury organization. Like, these people really, spend in their building. They must spend on their people type thing. Let me tell you something. When the interviewer came to collect me, we got in the lift. Even the lift was talking and singing at the same time. She said to me, that where they would usually do the interview is being refurbished, so they have to take me to another floor. Do you know when we got to this floor, I smelt the carpet before I stepped on it. When the doors open, I said, what is this? This doesn't look like downstairs. This doesn't look like downstairs. What's all this? How is it we're going into the interview room and the door doesn't even have handle? I said, what is this? What is this? But for me, I fell for it. She said to me that the office, the room that would usually do the interviews being refurbished. So maybe they're refurbishing everything. Like, I was allowing the story to gather chapters. Do you understand? Because in my mind, this is where I want to work. Did you see the outside of the building? Did you see the reception area? They're refurbishing. Oh my God, I want to work there. And when I'm asking certain questions and I'm asking certain pointed questions, now I look back and you can't catch me twice. Like, I really understand the world of work. But then I was still developing an understanding of the world of work. Like, I was still growing in knowing how the world of work works, right? And I worked there, and it's funny because when I went and did my research about this organization, everything I read when I got there, and now I don't work there anymore, everything was true. And they sold me a dream. They sold me a dream. And this is the workplace where they told me that my face didn't fit. This is the workplace whereby they didn't want to negotiate in terms of money, even though I literally was holding the team down. And then I left and come back as a contractor, charging them 3 or 4 times more than what they were paying me as my day rate. Do you understand? So I definitely think organizations as well kind of swindle you into believing something because they're trying to sell you something. And you have to look past the shop front. You have to be able to ask pointed questions, do your due diligence. Now, I'm going to sit here and tell you, and I've said it all the time. I said it on TikTok. I've said it on Insta stories. There's no such thing as a perfect organization. I've looked and I know it doesn't exist. Every organization is flawed. Why? Because the construct of the world of work has been to benefit white people. So if you know that already, then you know that every workplace has its imperfections. There is no such thing as a perfect workplace. What we're looking for, and for me, what I'm looking for in the world of work, in an organization, is how do I achieve my own personal objectives to be able to continue to grow and command a certain day rate wherever I go as a consultant. That's my approach. And when I was a permie or a fixed termer or whatever the case was, but when I was a non-contractor, my thing was, how do I grow in an organization enough to take what I need from them and go on to the next thing? Because I realized as well quite early on that I was never going to realize success in one organization and that there was always going to be a ceiling. And my job was to recognize when I hit that ceiling and know when it's time to move on. So I believe I've told you guys that I've never stayed in an organization more than 2 years. And it was probably the best thing I've ever done because I found that when I peaked, they just wanted me to stay stagnant. And I was always confronted by the realization of what stagnation could mean, i.e. I worked with somebody who'd been in an organization for 10 years and she was like a manager of a team. And then when somebody new came in, they got rid of her because for them, she wasn't attractive enough in terms of skill set. Because for them, yes, she'd grown within the organization, but she hit a ceiling and she just stayed there. And I never wanted that for myself. So I definitely feel as though for that particular organization, I was swindled. But equally, I definitely feel like when you're going into like interviews and stuff, and there was a post that I saw and I can't find it, I've been looking for it for ages, whereby the post basically says when you go for an interview, 2 people are not being honest with each other, and it's the interviewer and the interviewee. You're going with your best foot forward. You're not going to go there and tell them all your flaws. And an organization isn't going to do the same. They're going to come with their best foot forward. They're going to sell you a dream. They also have a role to fill. They're spending money on an interview process. You want a new job. Maybe your current position or where you currently are is toxic or untenable. Maybe you've been out of a job for a long time. Maybe for you, this is a CV builder. So both people are coming with intention. Your job is to do enough due diligence to understand the degree of how bad an organization is. It's to be able to see whether this is worth your investment of time and energy, because when you go in for interviews, when you're going to organizations, when you're considering organization, it's an investment of time, mental time, physical time, emotional time? Are you able to achieve your objectives in this organization within a certain period of time before you know it's time to move on? And I feel like if you approach job interviews in organizations knowing that you are going to be swindled, you're going to be lured into a false sense of security to believe something that really in reality isn't the truth, then I think then you start to then temper your expectations. You have more realistic expectations of organizations. You have more realistic expectations of people that you are dating, especially when you've done your due diligence. And I think a lot of people ask me, and it's new people who maybe haven't listened to the podcast, what is the due diligence? And I always say you need to listen to the podcast episode. But for me, it's asking intentional questions, asking about management style. You know, has this organization recently, like for example, the organization I used to work for when I was a perm, when I joined them, they were a public company, and then they went private, and they were being bought by a private equity firm, and there was a lot of change and restructure. But if I had done enough of my due diligence, I would have seen that over the period of 10 years, they had been bought and sold quite frequently. So there was a level of instability within that organisation. So when I went there, it was any wonder that within a year and a half of being there, they were being bought by a private equity firm, and it was an international company that bought them. So again, when that happens, you know that change is afoot. There's going to be management changes. Your job is at risk. Yeah. And also as well, what does growth look like? What does the trajectory of growth look like in an organization that's constantly like changing? And maybe the change is a good change, but for me, I'm thinking about how the change affects me in my career. And if I did enough due diligence, I would have known in my mind that actually, Toy, this is a CV builder for 2 years. But when I went into that role, I was sold and swindled into believing that I could possibly be there for a long period of time. It wasn't until a change in management and, you know, being told certain things and being confronted with certain things, I realised I've actually achieved my objective here. It's time to go. And that was the job that I think catapulted me into being a consultant, whereby I realised that I was ready to kind of take charge of my career, that I had built enough momentum, enough of a skill set, enough knowledge in my area that I was able to now become a subject matter expert and consult and leverage all that knowledge and all that experience to consult other organizations within my area. And I think that if you are interested in being a consultant, there's usually that one role that is the defining role that catapults you into that, if that makes sense. And I feel like sometimes being swindled by a role or being sold a dream about a role, and that disappointment that you feel should be turned into a positive in what you have learned. Like, what was it about that particular role that made you feel that you were safe enough to continue staying there without actually planning kind of what your trajectory looked like? Now, I could never go to an organisation and, you know, allow myself to be so embedded and so wedded that I didn't know when it was time to leave. Where I'm at now, I've got to be honest, this was only meant to be 6 to 9 months. I never stay anywhere more than 6 to 9 months. But when the pandemic happened and the uncertainty of what that meant, as a consultant, it made sense that with this particular organisation, when they were renewing my contract, that I stayed there. I've been there for almost 14 months, and that is like the longest contract I've done since being a contractor. And it's time to go. It's actually time to leave. And there is so much happening at the moment that is reinforcing my view that it's time to leave. And I'm having a lot of conversations, and I'm in a good space. I must say I'm in a good space, and, you know, I'm doing a lot of like consultancy stuff as part of Toy Talks as well. And I think there is going to be that shift that happens between kind of taking a break from my career and fully focusing on Toy Talks. And when that time comes, I'm ready for the challenge. But equally, I think we need to know when that time comes, right? When it's time to leave, when we have been swindled and duped enough about a role that we realise that actually this isn't it for me, or I've reached the ceiling. I think some people become so comfortable in a role that you find yourself staying too long, and then you're confronted with all these problems because you didn't know when it was time to go. And don't get me wrong, I'm not sitting here saying, oh, it's so piss easy to get a job. It's not. In a market where sometimes industry is quite saturated, it's not always easy to get a role. But equally as well, that your job is to have clear objectives for your career and be able to be in charge of your own destiny and how you evolve and how you grow. You know, your manager is not the key to your success. We've got an episode about that. And setting your own objectives for your career. Like, if your view is that you want to grow within an organization, fair enough. But then I would challenge you and I would say, how many people that look like you have grown in that organization? And it has to be more than one. Otherwise, that token is going to be replaced by another token. Like, you need to be able to look in an organization and say, what does growth look like for people who look like me? That's a question I feel like people don't ask all the time. You allow an organization to keep promising you things and keep deceiving you. Oh, next year you're going to get that promotion. Next year we're going to recognize you. We're going to give you a bonus. Oh, you're going to be employee of the year. And we cheapen our value by allowing ourselves to continuously be manipulated and scammed by organizations that are only interested in keeping bum on a seat, the knowledge in the building. Some organizations are not in the business of encouraging growth because they know growth means sometimes leaving them. So they'll manipulate you into staying by giving you cheap offers to stay. And it's cheap. And it's cheap because I realized that telling me company benefits outside of shares within an organization, and even then, you know, you still need to understand what the share mechanism looks like. But outside of shares, when you look at actual benefits that I feel like they're not actually benefits, right? So when someone says, oh, after 5 years, you get extra 5 days holiday, that's not actually a benefit. After 5 years, you should, because you've shown loyalty to an organization. Do you understand? But they hide things under the guise of benefits to manipulate you into staying, because then you become wedded to that organization. And for me, I realized that actually the best benefit is freedom. The best benefit is being a free spirit. And I know that being a consultant, being a contractor isn't for everybody, because some people like that continuity and like that stability. But I'm going to sit here and comfortably say to you, you can still have that by being a perm, but also knowing when it's time to go onto the next perm role as well. For me, I'm a free spirit, and I felt very much trapped by organizations because of stability. And because I like control, so I like to control the narrative of my career. So the idea of being a contractor means that I have to also trust a very volatile market, and there's times when there isn't roles, you know. But then the challenge for me is now making sure I have enough in the savings that if there is a lull period of a month or two, so for example, I'd say the last 3 weeks of March, the job market becomes a little bit stale, and that's because organizations have burnt through their budget and they're waiting for the new financial year for a new budget. So as a contractor, I know that. So I've saved enough so that if I'm looking for a new contract and I'm not finding one, or one that I'm happy with, then I know there's going to be like a bit of a stalemate. You have enough money so that you can tide you over until your next contract, or knowing the right time to look for a contract. The peak time to look for a new contract or a new role, I would say would be end of January, February times. Around this time is a good time. But whenever you're dealing with budgets and financial year, you know, those times are a bit more precarious, right? Because people don't know how much headcount they can have. Around that time, some people are getting their contracts are not being extended, especially if you're a contractor, because they've burnt their budget. Maybe they're not aware of what monies are available in the pot for the new financial year, so they have to cut headcount. Maybe they've spent too much and they have to cut headcount. So understanding the market and understanding the role and the organization you're in, and understanding what it is to be either an employee or a contractor is really, really important, because organizations are in the business of swindling too. When you say swindling, it's a different type of swindling. It's manipulation. They're in the business of manipulating because they still need people in the roles. And what organizations also don't realize is, listen, someone can give you a handover and there's no contractual or legal obligation for anyone to give you a handover. But that, you know, we've spoken about that before, and that's for another episode anyway. But the knowledge that goes out of the door with that person is priceless. There's not enough handover notes I could write. There's not enough handover sessions I could give that could really pass on the knowledge I have. There's not enough, because it's in my head, especially when you, like for me, I've been working as a contractor for this particular organisation. There are going to be things that you're not going to remember to put down in handover notes. It's when situations arise, then you tap into that knowledge and that experience to be able to, you know, manage it or find a solution, or, you know what to do, you know. And I think we don't place enough value on ourselves. You know, some people see themselves as commodity, And we need to move away from that. We need to start seeing ourselves as businesses. I've told you guys, even as a full-time, part-time, perm, you are still a business. You need to start seeing yourself as a business, because I think if you start seeing yourself as a business, you start valuing yourself as your business. You start acting like you're in the business. Because for me as a perm, I was in the business of becoming a subject matter expert. So I was in the business of investing in myself. I was in the business of trying to utilize certain things within an organization to get me to that level whereby I could then move on to be a consultant. You have to have objectives. The same way companies have company and corporate objectives, as an individual, as a business, as you stand as yourself, you need to have objectives too. How can you go to an organization, feed into objectives, they drum it into you, their ethos, but you as an individual don't even have your own ethos or have your own objective? I don't understand that. I was a business as a perm employee before I was a business as a contractor. That's how I look at it. You don't just wake up one day as a contractor and say, right, I'm a business. I feel like I was always, because I always knew what my objective was. And my objective is, if I become a subject matter expert, I'll have leverage. What is leverage? Power. What is power? Power is whatever I decide it is. And for me, it was power to be able to be a subject matter expert, to demand a certain day rate or to demand a certain salary. And I understood that that leverage would mean that I would be able to climb the career ladder quicker. I have climbed the career ladder twice as quick being a contractor than I had done being a perm. But I understand that I had to lay the foundation as a perm, because organizations were selling me a dream and it was never coming true. It was never coming true. They would tell me that they have a training budget, but I never actually got to benefit from that training budget. And even when I did, I had to now do a justification paper as to why I should benefit from it, even though me benefiting it is the organization benefiting. But I then quickly realized that actually the key to my success is the investment that I put in myself, and it's the time, it's the knowledge I acquire. Some people, you'll go into a job and you're waiting for people to give you work. Sometimes you have to be able to place yourself in a situation to look at things holistically and say, okay, I've asked for this, I've asked for work and they're not giving me work. I haven't been here for long. Right, I'm going to do a course online. And you've got an audit trail of asking for work or using your initiative. We're not taught how to use our initiative because sometimes it can be misinterpreted. But that's why you have to do your due diligence in an organization to understand how your initiative is used. So for me, for example, one organization I was working for, I was replacing someone, but no one was giving me work and I had no handover. So I had to use my initiative. Hi, colleague, is there anything I can help you with? And you have some colleagues that don't want you to help them because they don't want you to take their job. Then you have to say to yourself, okay, what was this person doing? Meet the stakeholders. Ask your boss can you send me an introductory email so I can meet this person? And have things in an audit form. So no one can come to say to you, sitting there and doing nothing. Well, I wasn't really, because I asked for work and nobody wanted to give me the work. Do you understand? And I feel like that is how you place yourself at the forefront of your career. You are duped into these roles, you're misled, you're lured into a false sense of security, and you have to be able to do your due diligence enough to understand that there is a level of manipulation on both sides. An organisation will manipulate you. They're not going to tell you their problems. You're manipulating them because you want them to see you as the best person for the job. But you have to be one step ahead by having your objectives and understand what you're trying to get out of that organisation. You should never go into an organisation without knowing what you want to get out of it. Never. I genuinely believe that people who are serious about their careers have a plan. You have a plan. You have to have a plan. Listen, we're living in a society that has placed us in a situation whereby, okay, all the bills are going up. Gas, electric. We're placed in a situation where you have to work. You're going to have to work, right? You're going to have to make money. So my thing is, when you go into these organizations, why won't you have a plan to make the maximum amount of money? Even if it means that you're going into a role, and this is the role that is going to be the foundation role. Learn. My next role. So for me, I was always, at the back of my mind, I always knew where my next role would be, or where I would hope my next role would be. I was always very clear about my vision board and what I was manifesting. And I know some of you think, oh, you know what, Toya, it's all like gobbledygook, the manifestation. And it really isn't, because there is so much that's happening in my life and so much that has happened that I'm yet to share, or so many things that I have done that I've never shared, that has come from having a plan and being intentional with that plan, putting things into my vision board and then having clear objectives. And that doesn't take away from the chaotic and toxic interactions that we have to have in the world of work, especially when you're dealing with people who are intrinsically very racist and who deliberately want to make you uncomfortable and deliberately make you feel as though you don't belong. I'm not trying to remove that from this conversation, because we talk about that all the time, and I'm very honest and transparent about my own experiences, but be under no illusion. If you really think that after, when you earn a certain pay bracket, then you won't be dealing with certain issues, that's a lie. Because the more senior you become, the more overt the racism is. The more overt. You see, when you're junior, it's a little bit more covert. And I think it's just because there's that hierarchy. So you don't get to, as you know, interact as much with like CEOs if you're at an entry level job. Like, you may not have that. So your exposure to that level of toxicity is not very much. But the more senior you become, the more exposed you are to it. I mean, I'm a contractor, but I'm a senior. I look at the situations I've been through. Look at the situations I've been through. Like, I'm drafting grievances as a contractor. Like, it doesn't get more crazy than that, you know? Where people are basically putting things in email, in writing, and basically discriminating against me and attempting to bully me. Like, I'm senior, you know? You're almost having to, like, they want me to justify my position. I'm not going to do that when I'm working with people who have used white privilege, who are illiterate in a role that they're only in it because they're white. I'm not going to justify my existence. Not when I have done how many years in education to get to where I am. I've done X, Y years of sacrifice to get to where I am. I've grafted to get where I am. Some of these people have not. It's their friend of a friend of a friend of an uncle of a friend. White privileging or relatives of the colonizer is the reason why they're in these roles. I therefore don't feel like I need to justify myself. You know, the micro and macro aggressions that we deal with on a daily basis. Oh wow, I really love your accent. Oh, did you study here in England? Yeah, these are the questions I get asked. Why wouldn't I have studied here in England? And what is it about my accent that you was expecting to be different to what it is? You know? Or when someone says, oh yeah, I grew up in North London, I grew up in Maidavale. Well, I'm sorry, Maidavale is not North London, darling, not the same North Londoner. Do you understand? Or when you're in a meeting and someone says, oh, what have you done to your hair? And suddenly your hair is the focal point of that conversation, just to make you feel different, or to remind you you're not the same because my hair don't look like yours. Do you understand? Or making certain comments. You know, I had to, I remember the beginning of lockdown, blurring my background because people are looking in your house to see how they can judge you about what they see. Oh, you've got new shelves. Oh, these are the things that we're dealing with in the world of work. So you have to be intentional about why you're there. You have to be. If you've been in an organisation for 5 years, and you are not growing at the same rate as your white counterparts, you don't need to be there no more. You need to find another organisation. Even if it's a competitor, you need to go. Because that would mean that you've reached your ceiling while this colleague of yours is growing. What you don't want to get to is you reach the ceiling, you stay because you're too comfortable, and that colleague of yours becomes a director and now comes to manage you as you've stayed in the ceiling. Some people are comfortable being at a ceiling, but believe me, there's nothing comfortable with hitting a ceiling, because when it's time to do redundancies, they'll be looking at you. They'll be looking at you. Anyway, I'm hoping that, this provides a bit of context when we talk about swindling, and, I think understanding that it's not just in relationships one is being swindled. One is getting swindled in the workplace. One is getting swindled at interview stage. Some people, they're getting swindled when they're looking at the job description before they've applied for the job. And some of us are doing the swindling. Some of us are making our CVs a lot more attractive. We're just, we're using we're not lying, we're exaggerating certain things, right? Because we want to appear more appealing. That's a form of quote unquote swindling, if you like. But you and I both know that it's about degree, yeah? I mean, swindling somebody out of 40 grand because your enemies are after you, or swindling somebody out of 100 grand because your enemies are after you when there's no one after you and you're just literally doing it to defraud people, versus, exaggerating things on CV is very, very different, by the way. I guess the irony about the Tinder swindler is the women have opened a GoFundMe page so they can raise money to pay back the loans that they took out. So my question is, how much did they get paid from Netflix? Did they even? So is the swindling continuing? I don't understand. When are we going to start learning our lessons, ladies? Ladies, ladies? And it's #1 viewed program on Netflix UK. So I don't understand how they're doing a GoFundMe page. Are you trying to tell me that Netflix didn't pay them? I need someone to answer the question. Did Netflix pay them? And if they didn't, why are they so free to just be free? Why is everything free? The first thing I would have thought is, are they going to make a donation to what I owe? Do you understand? Anyway, moving along. So I got a if you guys follow me on TikTok, so my TikTok account name or handle is called Toy Washington, all one word. And what I do is I do like quick, tips. So I don't go in depth, it's just quick tips. And obviously if you want the more in depth, then you'll go on the website for the masterclass or listen to the podcast or both. So I did tips about resigning, like certain things that you should do, like prep work before you resign, And in the back of my mind, one of the reasons I've done that is because I know I'm doing a masterclass on resignations and stuff. And someone left a comment and basically said, well, how do you resign if you have like a non-competition clause or a non-solicitation clause? Like, how would you go about doing that? So I said, email me. So this person emailed me and he basically said, listen, Toya, I've been in this organisation for, I think he's been there for 2 months and he is on his probation. I think his probation is about 3 months. And he basically found a new job and he works in the tech industry. And he went to his boss verbally and said to his boss, listen, I'm going to resign. And, I found a new job. And this was all verbal. So the boss was defensive. And he said, well, you can't resign. You need to think about it. Go away and think about it. And remember, he's on probation. So his resignation, he only has to give 2 weeks notice. So if he's going to think about it, he can't use the thinking time in lieu of notice, because the contract basically says if you're going to resign, it has to be in writing. So if you're doing it verbally, you can't now say, oh, I've given you that notice and then I'm going to give you an additional week. It doesn't work like that. But then the director said to him, oh, you need to bear in mind that you have a non-solicitation clause and a non-compete clause. And quite aggressively, right? So just for context, a non-solicitation clause is basically, in layman's terms, it's a clause that basically says that when you're going to an organisation, maybe you're going to a competitor, that you're not going to poach their staff, yeah? And a non-compete clause is, and it depends how it's worded, but a non-compete clause within a contract, for example, could be that you will not work for a competitor, or you won't work for the same customers as your current organisation has with a competitor. You won't work with that customer for 2 years. So you're not going to go to a new organisation and work with the same customers as your old organisation for a period of time. Or a non-compete clause could be that you cannot work for a competitor for a certain amount of time. Yeah? Now, when the director said that to him, he got worried because he thought, okay, does that mean I can't take a new job now? Or that I have to reject the job offer because there's a non-compete clause? So he didn't know what to do. So he basically told me the situation, and I said to him, send me your, so he sent me the clause, and I said, no, I need to see the entire employment contract. So he sent me the entire employment contract, and I looked at the non-compete clause, and I looked at the non-solicitation clause. And then I said to him, have you resigned? And he said, well, I have resigned verbally, but the problem is he's asked me to go away and kind of think about it and then come back to him. So as far as I'm concerned, I believe that he was just getting more time, right? I think that he was thinking that the guy was just, acting out of emotion. He didn't really respect the fact that this guy is actually really resigning. Now, what I will say is, when you are planning to resign, or for me personally, I don't know about some of you guys, but when I know I'm resigning for a role, whether even as a contractor when I'm leaving, I'm very gathered in that I will already write my resignation before I plan to. So if I'm resigning next month, I will already have my resignation ready. And I think it's mentally for me, it helps me prepare to leave. And also there's something therapeutic and cathartic about writing a resignation. Try it. If you're planning to leave somewhere, write a resignation. And I promise you, when you review it close to the time when you plan to resign, you'll amend it, because I remember there was one place I worked, my resignation was 3 pages. By the time I was ready to hand it in, it was literally 2 paragraphs, because it's cathartic, and it does something to you from a mental health perspective, knowing that you're about to resign. You're pouring into this resignation, but knowing that the final resignation that you send in shouldn't be more than a couple of paragraphs. So with this guy, I drafted his resignation, and I just want to give you guys some context as well. One of the reasons I did this is because I know I'm doing a masterclass on resignations, and I wanted to, you see, for me, I'm always learning, and I'm very much that type of person whereby if there's an opportunity for me to add to my skill set, that's what I'm going to do. And I wanted to challenge myself. This is a new employment contract. I've never seen it before, and I had a limited amount of time to be able to help him because his new job was starting at a certain time. And you know, he's never come across my platform before. He doesn't know anything about Toya Talks. I just came up on his TikTok, and it happened to relate to his situation. So for me, it was also an opportunity for me to challenge myself to read a contract I haven't read before, an employment contract, and really pick out the information I need and challenge myself to formulate this resignation for him. And something in my spirit said that he really needed this help. He didn't know what to do, and a week had already passed, and he had to give 2 weeks' notice. So this is the resignation I drafted for him and sent to him. So, dear director, whatever his name is, confirmation of resignation. Now, the reason I called it confirmation of resignation is because he's already resigned verbally, and now he has to put it in writing because he's contractually obligated to put his resignation in writing and provide the sufficient notice. During my meeting with you I'm going to make up a date here. During my meeting with you on the 1st of February, I provided you with notice of my resignation. You had asked that I reflect and come back to you. However, I have done, and my position remains the same. I wish to resign from my position and whatever his position is. Note that I am within my probationary period, which contractually requires notice of 2 weeks. Despite my notice to you on the 1st of February 2022, I have not received confirmation from you, and therefore I am confirming my resignation to you in writing for the avoidance of doubt. My last day being, and he'll write when his last day will be. Now, the reason I have been very pointed about that is there's a certain day he needs to leave, and he can't afford to give them an additional week. Yeah, so he's given the verbal notice, and then his 1 week remaining. He can't then give another week because he gave a verbal notice. So he has to be very intentional about what he's writing here, because what they're going to try and say is, no, you owe us a week. So there may be a bit of tension, a bit of friction, but it's about the tone of your resignation. You need to be forthright, you need to be clear, you need to be concise. At least that will give you some form of leverage. And remember, they have to replace you. So it's in their best interest to not piss you off. Right. During my meeting with you, you made reference to the non-competition and non-solicitation clause within my employment contract. I have also sought external advice. The reason I wrote that is to let them know that he's serious. And external advice could be legal advice. It could be advice from ACAS. It could be advice from a trade union, or it could be advice from Toya Talks. I shall not solicit or work with your customers in my next role, and will of course abide by the clause. However, note that this clause is not indefinite, and whilst you have not quantified the period of which clause 26, and clause 26 is the non-solicitation clause, is effective for, you cannot have an indefinite clause. There must be a degree of pragmatism used in the application of clause 26, which is the non-competition and non-solicitation clause. This being said, I have, as part of my employment contract, also agreed to the confidentiality clause within clause 24. I would also expect that should you have concerns regarding the non-solicitation and non-competition clause, that you would then exercise the use of garden leave as referenced in clause 20 of my employment contract. I do not wish to depart on bad terms. I would like the opportunity to start afresh and find a role more suited to me. Thank you for the opportunity you've provided me within your organisation. Kind regards. That is the resignation. There didn't need to be a long story about the meeting that he had and what was said and what didn't say. You stick to the facts. There's no emotion in this. It's pure, hard facts. His director set the tone. when he mentioned the non-solicitation and non-competition clause. But the thing is, these people will say it, but have never read the employment contract. You cannot have a non-competition clause or a non-solicitation clause within a contract that's indefinite. You can't have an indefinite clause, because that would mean that nobody could ever work for the competition. That means you could work for Sainsbury's head office, and then you can't work for Tesco's head office. It doesn't work. There has to be some pragmatism applied to the application of these clauses. And this is why some employment clauses, if not most of them, some employment contracts, have a garden leave. And what is garden leave? Garden leave is you've resigned from a role. Then an organisation can exercise the fact that you will work your notice from home. So basically, you're still going to be employed by them. They're still going to pay you, but we want you to be at home because we don't want you to continue to have access to our business intelligence. And that's the reason why there's usually an application. It's usually applied garden leave, because what organizations are afraid of, and especially in this case, is the use of their business intelligence that will benefit their competitor. But you have garden leave, so put him on garden leave then for the rest of his notice. If he's telling you he's got another week left, put him on garden leave. But organizations don't want to do that because they want a handover. They don't want to do that because they want to make sure they extrapolate every inch of your working for them as possible. But what you can't do is threaten him and say, oh, you've got this clause, you've got this clause, when there is other clauses in the contract that also protects the business. There's a confidentiality clause in every employment contract. There should be, which means that you have to keep business intelligence confidential. You can't deliberately and intentionally share business intelligence that will basically bring an organization down. There's also garden leave. If you're so afraid of this, your business intelligence leaking or being shared or continuously being assimilated, then I can work from home. Or not even work from home. I will just continue to be employed by you, but I will leave early. That's garden leave. So you're giving them options here. And I think that what will happen is the organisation will have to use pragmatism because he has all the leverage. After all, it's that him they need a handover for. He's in his probation period, so he's only given 2 weeks' notice. And number 3, he's been very clear and concise about his last day, about the clause in the contract that he's sought external advice, and therefore there's a limit now to what HR or the director can do. So they now have to find a middle ground that benefits both of them. So yeah, I wanted to share that with you guys because when it comes to resignations, I know sometimes it can be quite difficult. It's quite awkward. I'm not going to lie. I remember there's an organisation I worked for and I resigned when I was on annual leave. So I didn't have to deal with them. But then you still have to go back and deal with it, right? But I wanted maximum impact as well. That organisation was mad. So they needed that level of resignation. I had another dilemma from a young lady, and basically she had been offered a particular, so she's working in an organisation and they wanted to give her a pay rise. She thinks that she deserves more money than what they're offering, so she doesn't know what to do. And I went back to her and said, listen, I've got the negotiation masterclass on the website. I've got the tools there. What I won't do is repeat something that is already on the platform, and I've said this before, because there has to be an investment that you're willing to do on yourself. Yeah, I'm giving you this information every Tuesday for free. This podcast is free. I'm giving you my knowledge. I'm giving you my experience. I'm giving you my blueprint. Then on top of that, I'm creating masterclasses so that I can teach you guys, and you have access to the masterclasses indefinitely. I don't say you have access for it for 2 years. It's indefinitely, because I know that there's going to be times when you want to go back. Then you email me and say, oh, I've been offered this and I need to negotiate, but I'm not happy with what they're offering me. How should I go back? Well, there's a masterclass for it. And this is how I'm also protecting my creativity and my peace as well, because I feel like if I keep repeating things, that's not how people learn. People, as far as I'm concerned, learn by also investing in yourself and taking the opportunity to go and seek the information. So if you listen to the podcast, if you're an avid listener, as you tell me, then you would know there's masterclasses, negotiation masterclass, CV masterclass, redundancy masterclass, interview skills masterclass, the mother and daughter masterclass. They exist on the website. You would also know that I'm going to add to those masterclasses this February as well. It's a lot of time and a lot of planning that goes into those masterclasses. I literally sit there and I scope everything out. This is the reason why it takes time to be able to produce it, and then I edit it. And then I especially with the CV masterclass, I'll give you templates. So if that exists, you can't then expect me to then take from those masterclasses to reply to you when you haven't gone to get that information yourself that is housed on the website, toytalks.com. So that's what I said to her. You need to go on the website. It's all there. Lastly, I'm going to speak about this a bit more next week, but there are some MPs who are calling for the ethnicity pay gap. They want organisations to have an obligation to report the ethnicity pay gap. And do you know why this is really important? The gender pay gap is one level, but the ethnicity pay gap is another. Because I think some people are going to be very, very shocked at the difference in racial discrimination based on pay. If organisations have now an obligation to report on ethnicity pay gap, and then you've got organisations that are talking about equal opportunities and racial diversity and all of that, but one ethnicity now is getting paid a lot more than others, it shows that an organisation is not living in accordance to the ethos or in accordance to what they're portraying. And in order to close the gap, we need transparency. And the only way to get that transparency is for organisations to have an obligation to share and publish the ethnicity pay gap. So I'm going to talk a bit more about, the MPs and what they're hoping to get approved in Parliament, or what the discussions are currently being had. We're going to talk about it. And then I think there is something to be said in organisations about opening up that discussion as well. So let's talk about that next week. I am going to continue to create. I'm going to continue to show up every Tuesday, and I'm hoping that you guys are going to continue to rock with me as well. And I'm so excited for the things that are to come this year on the podcast, on the platform. I've already taken 4 bookings for speaking events for the Toy Talks podcast, and I'm just blown away with how you guys are receiving the podcast, how you guys are using it and applying it. And that's the most important thing. Like, you're listening to learn, but the next step needs to be the application. It's being able to use this on a practical level to change the scope of what your working life looks like, or to change the path of your career. If I have tasted success and enjoy success in my career, for me, I feel like I have to continue to sow into my community by sharing the blueprint. But part of that sharing is requiring you guys to take action. So your call to action is applying the knowledge, sharing the knowledge, and really committing to investing in your career. And the only way that's going to happen is if you take the learnings and actually use it on a practical level. And insofar as you guys continue to rock with me, continue to want to learn and want to grow, I'm going to continue to show up for you guys every Tuesday. I'm going to continue to put out content. I'm going to continue to use my social media to create awareness and conversation, and to give you guys the knowledge and share my learning experiences and share the dilemmas and each other's learning experience. This is going to continuously be a state of learning and growth. For me, this is a safe space for fellow Black women like myself to come and be safe and have these difficult conversations. And, you guys know how I am. I'm very straight talking, very straight down the line. I don't think it's right that people pretend to sell a dream. I'm just giving you guys what real life looks like in accordance to my experiences. And I'm in a fortunate position where I have a lot of work experience, but I have a lot of bad experiences as well. And I haven't always handled things, especially in my early 20s, in the right way. But to sit here and call myself a subject matter expert of navigating the world of work as a Black woman and becoming successful, I really hold that as a real badge of honor, because even though I am successful, I'm still going through my own issues at work, and I'm applying everything I know and all my knowledge. And that is also creating the success as well, because I get to work on my own terms. I get to leave on my own terms. I get to exist on my own terms in organizations. And it's amazing to be in a situation where I want to leave and I'm being told, no, you stay, we'll give you more money. I love that, but that's not enough to keep me here. The objective of why I'm in an organization has been achieved, and for me, I've achieved that objective. So now I'm on to another one, you know. So anyway, thank you guys so much for listening. I really hope you've learned from this episode. You know, people would try to sell you lifestyle and vibes across the board, work, relationships and friendships, and your job is to do your due diligence and really sit back and understand what people are trying to say and their motivations and the reason why. You know, it's not never see it as something to be ashamed of, that somebody's taking advantage or stuff like that. The most important thing is that you learn from it. You don't allow history to repeat itself. You ask questions, you're inquisitive, you're interrogative, you do your research, you do your due diligence. That's the most important thing. And you know, L is for learning lesson, G is for growth, and W is for win. Anyway guys, I'm going to leave it there. Thank you so much for listening. If you want to follow me on my social media, I'm very active, as I always say, on Instagram stories. I'm very active on there. My Instagram handle is Toya_Washington. My Twitter handle is Toya_W. My TikTok account is Toya Washington, all one word. And on Snapchat, it's Toya Washington, all one word as well. If you have a work-related dilemma, all I would ask is that you keep it straight to the point, take the emotions out of it as much as possible, and be clear about what you're hoping to achieve, like what outcome are you wanting to achieve, and that will help me guide how I then reply to your dilemma. And if you have a work-related dilemma, or maybe it's a relationship dilemma, and you want us to talk about it here, your anonymity will always be protected. Please email hello@toytalks.com. I've got like a couple more dilemmas that I will be discussing in next week's episode, because we have run out of time this week. But that being said, you can go on the toytalks.com website for all things Toy Talks. You will soon be seeing some new masterclasses on there, and if you haven't already, go and check out the masterclasses that are already on there. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for sharing. If you are listening on Spotify, please rate this podcast. It really helps me out. If you are listening on Apple Podcasts, please rate and review the podcast. And any other platform in which you're listening to the Toy Talks podcast, please rate and review. It really helps me out, and it really helps new listeners out as well, who are interested in the podcast or are interested in your reviews, that would then entice them to come and listen to the podcast and come and learn and grow and be part of the Toy Talks family. Thank you so much for listening. My name is Toya Washington, and you have been listening to the Toy Talks podcast.